Hello again, everybody. Um, my last video, which I did on ants, intelligence and learning, had some really positive comments in the comments section, and a lot of things that I like to talk about were discussed. And Antimatters on his Ant News Network, which I hope everybody watches for the latest in anything ant related. One of the things he does is he looks at all other YouTube channels and reports if they've got new and interesting videos. He was kind enough to say that my video was his favourite of the week, so that was very nice of him as well. But what I noticed was that I think I need to do another video to explain pheromones so that people understand what pheromones are and how an ant sees its world. So yeah, while I've been chatting here, you've been watching some of the small amount of ant footage that's going to be in this video. I shall see what's coming later is some wonderful cartoon drawings by me, wonderful inverted commas. Yeah, an ant is almost blind. Yes, they've got eyes, but they are compound eyes, and compound eyes work in that the bigger the eye, the better the eye. So if you want to see better with compound eyes, you've got to have more of the little compound eyes. That's why flies, for example, who need to see you coming when you're trying to swat them, that's why half their head is devoted, half their head is their left eye and half their head is their right eye. Ants haven't gone down that route. They've got tiny, tiny little eyes in comparison with, let's say, a fly, for example. And therefore their eyesight is really, really poor. Some ants can see better than others, but Lasius niger are not very good seeing ants. And their world, what they do is their world is based nearly all on smell. They map their world out through a thing called pheromones. And again, what I'm going to talk about here is Lasius niger, because that's what I keep. But one of the reasons I do keep Lasius niger is when it comes to pheromones, for example, Lasius niger are one of the cleverer ants out there. There seems actually to be a strange relationship between the more interesting to look at the ant, the more stupid the ant is, basically, the less tricks they've got in their book, the less pheromone trails they can lay. I mean, some species can't lay pheromone trails to food because they don't need to. They're harvester ants. They just gather seeds randomly blown by the wind. Some ants don't even lay pheromone trails at all, some of the very primitive ants, and they just rely on individuals going out and individually hunting and things like that. But yeah, Lasius niger, in fact, any ant that tends to live in towns and cities, so your Lasius, your Tetramorium, things like that, tend to have a good bag of tricks when it comes to pheromones. So yeah, you'll notice that as an ant sort of walks around, it is constantly scanning with its antennae, feeling and smelling its surroundings. And sometimes you'll even see them stop still and put their antennae in the air like two little radars, where they almost triangulate onto a food source. If they smell it, they take a few steps and then do the little radar again and try and work out, all right, that's that direction. So they can triangulate in on food by doing that. So yeah, pheromones are a chemical that they can dab from their abdomen on the floor. They can produce an aerial version of it, but that's for short-term alarm signals. The long-term navigational stuff is done by the chemical that can be dabbed on the floor. And they've got two lengths. There are two types of chemical here. There's one that, like I said, lasts about a week, maybe 2 weeks, and there's one that lasts about 10 minutes. And both of them are fading over time, so they're always getting fainter and fainter unless another ant adds to it, in which case, it can go up. So it's fading unless it's added to. So in their 10-minute toolbox, the ants have got the way of marking to a food source. So yeah, I started doing some little drawings. What you've got here, imagine this is the square or the rectangle is your outworld. The hole to their nest is the circle, and the cross represents some food. So what would happen is when an ant found the food, so an ant is at the X and has picked up some food, but there's too much food for that ant to take back individually, It will drink its fill, let's say, if it's a sugar source, and then it will head back to the nest. And as it goes, it will dab the floor with the pheromones. And it doesn't leave an actual line of pheromones. It's not like it trails behind. It dabs the floor, I think about every 3 steps, and would create something. If you wanted to turn the pheromones into a colour, which is what I'm doing here, would create something like this. So the little blue splodges are what the very first ant has left behind when they went from the food back to the nest. And you can see, as a human looking at this, if this was actually a scent, you would have at this stage a fairly good idea of where to go to get to the food. And what would happen is, if you were able to successfully follow this quite sparse line and get to the food, when you returned, you would add to the line, and then the next ant would add to the line, and the next one, and so on. So the line would start to get stronger and build up a bit like this. And you notice that I've not made it a straight line, because ants will wander off slightly to the left, slightly to the right. There won't be a definite line, but as you can see, and I know what I'm doing is I'm turning a smell into a sight, but as they can smell, it's still obvious what the direction is that they need to go in order to get to the food. And as time goes on and more ants come back, the trail will get stronger and stronger in the center of the trail. There will be more anomalies where ants have gone slightly off to one side, not directly stuck to the path. But as you can see, or as they can smell, it's made a nice clear line to show the ants exactly where to go to the food. And as I said, this pheromone lasts about 10 minutes. So once that food has gone and no ants are adding to the pheromone on the way back because they found food, because ants that don't find food don't add to the pheromone, it will get fainter and fainter and fainter until eventually after 10 minutes it will all have disappeared, and no new ants would then know to follow this to the food source. And then they've got their pheromone, which lasts for about a week. And this is the pheromone that they use to mark their home territory. And this is so that ants know that they're on their home territory and they haven't strayed into an opposing colony's area. And one of the ways that they know that they have strayed into an opposing colony's area, if they cross the border and can smell the home territory of another colony, they'll be like, oh, okay, better be careful here. And if another colony was to, for example, die out, because that would fade over time, the ants would notice, because they would notice there was no renewal of the home territory marking, and therefore they'd think, oh yeah, we can take over this area now. But anyway, what I've done here is I've drawn another outworld. The hole to their nest is the little circle up the corner. At the bottom corner with the X where the food is, I've drawn a circle around it. Imagine that's the stone where I regularly feed my ants. And then in the other corner, I've put, that's supposed to be a water feeder. Imagine there was a water feeder there, and that's where they're regularly getting their water from. So what happens is, as ants walk around their home territory, they're constantly dabbing it, saying, this is home territory, which lasts about a week. It fades over a week. But if ants walk more frequently in certain areas, then those areas become more strongly marked as home territory. So what the outworld would look like is, something like this. And you can clearly smell, I'm going to start using that term, you can clearly smell where the entrance to the nest is. Would you struggle to know where you need to go to find the hole to your nest? And you can clearly smell that there's something interesting happens at that cross, because a lot of ants, for various reasons, have gone there over the past week, and there's a very highly defined trail that leads to that cross. And for some reason, there's a lot of reason to go to the water feeder. A lot of ants have done that over the last week. So if you were an ant coming out of the hole and you wanted to go looking for food or looking for resources, one of the first things you might do is go down one of these two highly trod trails. Now, some ants are programmed to be the explorers, the foragers, and they will deliberately not go down the clearly trod trails. They'll be the ones that go off and look for new things. And then what would happen if I was to put an insect in, like let's say a dead insect, so I've put this little red, excuse my insect drawing, a little insect into there, what would happen then is that to get that insect, that's what their territory would smell like to them, but they can start drawing or painting those short 10-minute we found food trails to something new that's cropped up. So what you would see with that insect after a few minutes is something that looked like this. That is what their world would smell like to them. So yeah, sorry about the not so good drawings, but what I'm trying to do here is just to try and give you a visual representation of how ants see their world and how these pheromone trails and what's marked as home territory and common roots is how the ant is perceiving what they're living in rather than seeing it like you do. We get most of our information based on sight and very little based on smell. So yeah, hopefully this explains pheromone trails and how they work and how ants use them. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, everybody.